Welcome to this candidate forum featuring the candidates who are running for the Minnesota House of Representatives 43B. Note, there is not a forum for the candidates running for 43A because one of the candidates could not join us tonight, and the League does not hold forums with only one candidate. We are working to try and put something together instead. We're looking to reschedule. I'm Nancy Intermill, Chair of the Voter Services Committee of the League of Women Voters, Crystal, New Hope, East Plymouth, and Robbinsdale. The League sponsors these forums to provide the public with an opportunity to hear the candidates discuss the issues that are important to the public. The League of Women Voters has a proud history and long history of citizen education for our communities and to help voters make informed decisions in local elections by providing unbiased candidate and issue information. The League is a nonpartisan organization and does not support or oppose a political candidate or a party for office. The views expressed here tonight are those of the candidates and not those of the League of Women Voters. It is the League's policy to record and post the entire candidate forum without editing so that the public will see the event in its entirety and not just selected scenes or sound bites. Excerpts or edited clips of candidate forums may not be used for partisan or political purposes. We want to thank the candidates for participating, CCX Media for their coverage of the forum, and the City of Crystal for their assistance and use of their City Council chambers. And now I would like to thank and introduce our moderator, Cindy Shevlin-Woodcock, certified moderator from the League of Women Voters of Brooklyn Park, OCO, Maple Grove.
Good evening and welcome to the candidate forum for the Minnesota House of Representatives for 43B. The candidates are seated in alphabetical order and they will take turns being the first to answer questions. The format begins, I better put my glasses on. The format begins with opening statements. That will be followed by written questions from the in-person audience and those sent to the League in advance. Finally, there will be a 1-minute closing statement. Choice of questions was made by our question facilitator and by me in a good faith effort to reflect the interests expressed by this audience. Please remember that while respectful disagreement with the candidate's position is fine, personal attacks are not allowed. If your questions are not answered, please contact the candidate after the forum. The candidates for Minnesota House of Representatives 43B are Mike Freiberg and Steve Merriman. We have a timekeeper so that each candidate has the same amount of time to respond to questions. The timekeeper will hold up a card when you have 15 seconds. Yes. Okay, left, and a stop card when it's time to stop. We ask that you finish your sentence and that stop at that point, you both can see the timekeeper. Okay, just wanted to check on that. Let's begin with opening statements. You will each have 2 minutes for your opening statement, and we will begin with Mike Freiberg.
First of all, thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting on this debate. Thank you to Steve Merriman for running an issues-based campaign. I really appreciate it. For those of you who don't know me, I grew up in Golden Valley. I have 2 kids attending schools in the Robbinsdale School District, and I work as a public health attorney, and I've been a state representative for 12 years. The recent legislative session was historic. After many years of divided government that prevented meaningful progress for our state, we passed universal free school meals, legalized cannabis, adopted gun violence prevention measures, codified reproductive freedom, and banned forever chemicals. And those are only beginning to scratch the surface of the historic legislation that we passed during the past session. Now, as your state representative, I played a key role in delivering this legislation. I authored 36 bills that had at least part of them become law. These bills ranged in topics from service learning to funding a fire station in our district, to healthcare policy, to sewer infrastructure, to land surveying, to consumer fraud, to the state flag. I try to work on a variety of issues. I just find it more rewarding if you can kind of diversify the issues you work on as an elected official. I did chair the elections committee, helping to pass legislation such as automatic voter registration, pre-registration for 16 and 17-year-olds, Restore the Vote, the Minnesota Voting Rights Act, and the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. But more needs to be done to build a state that works for everyone. We need to continue investing in our public schools. We need to fund transit that will benefit the suburbs. And we need to continue to work to protect our environment and stop the cataclysm that is climate change. So during this debate, we'll discuss issues of importance to residents of District 43B, which includes all or parts of Crystal, Golden Valley, Plymouth, and Robbinsdale. I look forward to a substantive discussion, and thank you once again for hosting this debate.
Mr. Merriman?
Yes, my name is Steve Merriman, and I chose to run after reading the Sun newspaper article concerning Mike Freiberg's introduction of the assisted suicide bill in the Minnesota House. Some of the priority issues before the voter today are illegal immigration, inflation, high taxes, nuclear proliferation, and the drift of the Harris-Biden administration into armed conflicts. Over 1 million people have been killed or wounded in the Ukraine conflict, and we could be headed towards World War III. Regarding my background and qualifications, I graduated from the University of Minnesota with a Master of Science in Electrical Engineering degree and served in Vietnam as a naval officer aboard the USS England, DLG-22. I'm a registered professional engineer in Minnesota and have been married to my wife Margaret since 1968. We've lived in Golden Valley since about 1979. We have 3 children and 6 grandchildren. I'm a member of the Meeting House Church in Edina, the IEEE, the Crystal VFW, and I retired from Great River Energy as a telecommunication engineer 11 years ago.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to the questions from the audience and those submitted to the League's email. Candidates will have 1.5 minutes, 1.5 minutes to answer these questions. We will begin with Steve Merriman, and then it will be Mike Freiberg's turn. Okay, the first question, and I will repeat the question if you want me to. If elected, what would be your top 2 or 3 priorities for the next legislative session?
I believe my top priorities are education, the environment, and energy.
Okay. All right, Mr. Freiberg?
Thank you. Glad to hear Mr. Merriman also views education as one of the top issues. We made a lot of progress on that front in the past session. I mentioned free universal school meals for students. We raised the general education formula by 2% and 4% each year and indexed it to inflation. But schools are still feeling a pinch from a decade or more of underinvestment. So I think we need to do a lot more to help stabilize school funding. My kids are in the Robbinsdale School District. They get a great education. I strongly support the technology levy that's on the ballot this year and hope that passes. But as a state, I think we've underinvested in our schools for too long. So I'm hoping for more work on the school front. The second issue I'd identify is the environment, I think, is a huge one. Climate change is an existential threat. We made some great steps this past session in terms of requiring electricity to be carbon-free, but there's more to do. I think that we can reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. Third issue I'd identify is transportation. The inner-ring suburbs tend to get overlooked sometimes when Metro Transit is drawing out its bus routes and so forth. So I think we need to invest in a comprehensive transportation system that looks at the inner-ring suburbs in particular.
Thank you. Question 2 will be first addressed to Mr. Freiberg and then Mr. Merriman. What more can our state legislature do to stem the proliferation of gun violence in our communities?
Thank you for the question. That's a really great question. We made some critical steps this past session. I think having a trifecta enabled us to do some things we hadn't been able to do when there was divided government. Specifically, we passed a binary trigger law. We passed universal background checks. We passed a red flag law so that people who are a danger to themselves or to others can have a process in place where there's due process and they can have their firearms removed from them. I think there's more we can do. We didn't see school shootings, I think, until the federal ban on automatic weapons lapsed. So I'd be interested in looking at ways we can limit the use of automatic weapons. And one of the things we didn't pass this past session is a bill related to the safe storage of firearms. So I think that's another thing we need to look at this year, and I'm hopeful we will pass during the upcoming session.
Thank you, Mr. Freiberg. Mr. Merriman, would you like me to reread the question?
Please repeat the question.
Yes. What more can our state legislature do to stem the proliferation of gun violence in our communities?
I think, first of all, education. I think people should be educated to know the danger of weapons and know that they should not be using weapons to harm other people. I think that it's important that there's a culture of life and the people should be appreciate the life of other individuals.
Thank you. Okay, question 3, it will be Steve Merriman and Mike Freiberg. Last legislative session, House File 4182, the Equal Access to Broadband Act was introduced. The act would allow cities to franchise broadband providers in that municipality and collect fees to assure digital equity, build out broadband service standards, and to fund public interest programming, such as the broadcast of this forum. Would you support this legislation? Mr. Merriman.
Regarding House File 4182, equal access to broadband,
Yes.
I would not support that act. That act adds an 8% franchise fee to broadband non-cable TV services. It possibly will place $650 million of federal broadband funding at risk. My career was spent in telecommunications, and my goal when I was in telecommunications was to possibly deploy fiber as broadly as possible. It's a wonderful medium, and it provides huge bandwidth to customers and public. I would like to see broadband fully deployed throughout Robbinsdale and Golden Valley. Right now, this bill will delay home deployment because it adds a cost to the broadband.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Freiberg?
Thank you for the question. I know this question, I've been hearing this question's getting asked at other legislative forums, so thank you to whoever's submitting it. It is, I think the short answer to the question is yes. I was chief author of House File 4182, so I better be supportive of it. I think there was a lot of misinformation during the session related to the bill, kind of advocated by telecom companies and so forth, but it fills a critical need. I know the bill was supported by the League of Women Voters. I worked very closely with CCX Media and other regional cable providers on the language of the bill. More and more people are cutting the cord for cable, which is fine, but local media, like the type you're presumably watching this debate through right now, depends on cable franchise fees to fund educational programming and to fund these sorts of debates being broadcast so that people can know what candidates for office think. So I don't know that the bill is going to look exactly the same way that it did this past session. There was a lot of opposition to it that ultimately led to it not being passed. But I do think this issue of both access to broadband and access to public and educational governmental programming is not one that's going to go away. I think they fill a critical need. We've seen newspapers close in the suburbs, shut down. Like, it's getting harder and harder to get access to local news such as this. So I think it's a really important bill, and I plan to continue to work on it.
Okay, thank you. The question number 4 will be first addressed by Mr. Freiberg and then Mr. Merriman. Considering how the 2024 legislative session ended, how would you reform House rules to make the legislative process more open and transparent to the public?
Thank you. That's a big question. There's a lot that can and probably should be done. One of the things that where I think the legislature really let down the public during the past session was just in our debate practices. There was extensive filibustering on bills. We spent about 8 hours, certain members spent about 8 hours talking about listing their favorite cheeseburger place at one point. So one thing I know that was discussed at the beginning of the session but ultimately not adopted was time limits on debate. I think the fact that we're able to have extended debate even when it's not really offering anything of substantive value to the public, I think the fact that it's just able to keep going on with no value is letting down the public. And ultimately it led to a lengthy bill. Mr. Merriman and I were actually discussing this before the debate started. There was a lengthy bill. Now, each piece of the bill we debated extensively, but there was no end to the debate. So by the end of session, we had an obligation to govern. So everything got combined into one bill. We had debated the individual pieces of the bill, and we'd read those pieces of the bill, but ultimately that's kind of how we had to do it. So I would look at debate limits. That's how many other states do it. I think that would kind of go a long way, but I'm open to other suggestions as well.
Thank you. Mr. Merriman, would you like me to reread the question?
Sure.
Considering how the 2024 legislative session ended, how would you reform House rules to make the legislative process more open and transparent to the public?
Well, I think it would be best if only one bill was voted on at a time, and that bill was adequately discussed by the legislature. I think that if a party in power doesn't let the opposition party discuss the bill, that's not good.
Okay, thank you. Question number 5, Steve Merriman and Mike Freiberg, in that order. Menthol, candy, and fruit-flavored tobacco products are attractive to kids and can lead to a lifetime of tobacco addiction and disease. Do you favor ending the sale of all flavored tobacco products that appeal to kids and contribute to health problems?
I'm against products that harm our children. I don't think that's good. I think anything that we do to harm our children and as authorized by the government is not good. That includes genital mutilation of transgender people.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Freiberg, would you like me to repeat it?
Yes, why don't you repeat?
Okay. Menthol, candy, and fruit-flavored tobacco products are attractive to kids and can lead to a lifetime of tobacco addiction and disease. Do you favor ending the sale of all flavored tobacco products that appeal to kids and contribute to health problems?
Yes, I've been a co-author of the bill to ban the sale of flavored tobacco products, including menthol products. Tobacco products, the nicotine in tobacco products is specifically engineered to be as addictive as possible, particularly when people are younger and when they're kids. And the advertising that, I mean, it's, you know, we used to see Joe Camel all the time, but there's still plenty of tobacco advertising out there. If you just go to a local Speedway or Holiday gas station, you'll see it all over the point of sale. So these are products that are designed to appeal to kids. The flavors appeal to kids. it's manufactured specifically to be addictive to kids. So anything we can do to help reduce the harm caused by commercial tobacco products, I think, is a good thing. That includes banning the sale of flavored products, including menthol. The FDA at the federal level has the authority to do it, but they've had that authority for 15 years and they haven't done it. So I think it's up to states to step up and fill that public health need because the federal government has been letting us down.
All right, thank you. The next question, question 6, will be Mike Freiberg and Steve Merriman. What have you done or plan to do to help K-12 students be better prepared for success in school, life, and the community?
Well, I mean, I've mentioned some of the things we did at the legislative level, like free school lunches, providing funding so that there are adequate number of teachers, and lowering class sizes. I've also authored legislation related to service learning that became law and funded grants around the state to help give kids, students life experience. And just speaking from on a personal note, the past few years I've been the Quiz Bowl coach at Plymouth Middle School, and I've found that really rewarding. Quiz Bowl doesn't quite have the glamour of being, say, the football coach like our governor, but it's definitely a different type of kid that is probably more consistent with me, if I'm being honest with myself, rather than football. So we kind of started a program there, and this past year they went to the national tournament in Chicago. So I found that really rewarding personally, and hope to keep doing it.
Thank you. Mr. Merriman, would you like me to reread the question?
Well, I'm not in the legislature, but I do support my grandchildren. They are in school at night right now, and I go to their events. I go to my granddaughter's Gitsy performance at the Symphony Hall. I go to my grandchildren's track meets. It's important to help your grandchildren.
Okay. Thank you. All right, question number 7, Mr. Merriman and then Mr. Freiberg. And this one's a long one, okay. Minnesota law limits the use of ranked choice voting to local governments that are charter cities that hold elections on odd-numbered years. That limits ranked choice voting to fewer than 1% of local elections in this state. Would you support legislation to allow ranked choice voting in any unit of local government that would choose to use it? Mr. Merriman, you're first.
First, I'm personally opposed to ranked choice voting because I feel that voting should be done by individuals, and each individual should be allowed to vote once. And I believe in the primary system where parties pick their candidates, and then the candidates that come out of the primary system are opposing each other in the general election. I do not think ranked choice voting is a fair system. I think it leads to people that are not as qualified as they could be with the normal voting system.
Thank you. Would you like me to reread the question? No. Okay.
That's okay, it was kind of long.
Yeah, just a bit.
Yes, I support expanding ranked choice voting. The author of the bill to do so, Representative Frazier, is here in the room with us. He put in a lot of work on that. I think ranked choice voting has many benefits. I don't know that it's for every community necessarily, but I think cities and counties and school districts should have the option of doing it if they want to. I think that's what local control is and what local control means. I think it has the potential to make campaigns more positive if you have to, work on voters to be their second choice. You don't want to alienate the person who might be their first choice. I think it has the potential to reduce the spoiler effect in some elections. And so I think it has a lot of promise. As chair of the elections committee, we passed the bill out of the committee this year. We had a vote on the floor for it. That fell a little bit short. I do think it's going to continue to be an issue moving forward. We have, I think, we're 5 cities right now in Minnesota that use it, and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense that it's whether or not they can use it depends on whether or not they're a charter city and whether or not they have an odd year or even year election. So I live in a city, Golden Valley, that does not have the ability to do that. I've heard from city officials there that, they don't know that whether or not they would pass it, but they'd at least like to have that option. So I certainly support giving that option to cities and counties around Minnesota.
Thank you. Question number 8, Mr. Freiberg and then Mr. Merriman. What is your position on disclosing of campaign contributions by corporations? What changes in campaign finance laws would you support?
Minnesota does not allow for, at least state-level candidates are not able to accept contributions from corporations. So certainly I think if you live in a state that does allow that, it should be disclosed. We do have disclosure rules in Minnesota. I'm generally in favor of more disclosure and more transparency. I think it's important that people know who is supporting financially candidates. So I think it's like any contribution over $200 has to be reported by the Campaign Finance Board. I certainly support that. I'd be open to considering lowering that threshold. I don't know when that was last looked at, but generally speaking, I think the more disclosure there is, the better. And I do think, especially since Citizens United has passed and said that money equals speech, basically, the one area that the U.S. Supreme Court has said that you can have campaign finance regulations is this area of disclosure. So as long as we can't have, according to Supreme Court precedent, limits on contribution amounts or anything like that, then I think having more disclosure is a good thing.
Thank you. Mr. Merriman, would you like me to repeat the question?
Sure.
Okay. What is your position on disclosing of campaign contributions by corporations? What changes in campaign finance laws would you support?
I do not think corporations should provide funds to campaigns. This is not legal today, and it shouldn't be legal in the future. I think that we need to have, however, a ban on private company funding of elections. We should not have private companies fund our election system.
Okay, thank you. Question number 9 will be Mr. Merriman and then Mr. Freiberg. If elected or re-elected, would you view this position as a long-term opportunity or as a stepping stone to a higher office?
I think you were first.
My first? Oh.
Yes.
I just reached 80, so this is my last time in asking to be elected. There are no more elections for me.
Okay, thank you.
First of all, happy belated birthday. I don't know exactly when your birthday was, but 80 is a significant year, so congratulations. I just kind of take things a year at a time. I don't view this, I enjoy this work. I still find it rewarding. I feel like I do a fairly good job at it. So I'm running for another 2 years, and 2 years from now, I'll think about whether I want to do it for 2 years, again. And I don't generally support term limits. I think that tends to empower staff and lobbyists. At the same time, I don't see myself doing this necessarily forever. And I don't view higher office as a goal in and of itself either. So maybe if the circumstances were right, I might run for something else. But at this point, I think most of the people that hold other offices that I might consider are doing a good job, so I don't see any particular need to. I've been a state representative for 12 years and enjoy it, and don't really see, never rule anything out, but at this point I don't see myself doing anything else necessarily.
Okay, thank you. Question number 10, Let's see,
Freiberg.
8, 9, I forgot to check you off. Freiberg first, Merriman second. Pain is a major healthcare expense, and non-drug pain management options should be considered. Currently, acupuncture is covered by some insurance, but not all. Would you support a bill that mandates coverage for acupuncture as a treatment for pain?
Yes, I've worked with a resident of Crystal, a former constituent who's I still keep in touch with on this bill. I've chief authored the bill to do that. I think acupuncture is something that has the potential to mitigate pain management, and it's not an opioid medication that's potentially addictive. I think any time we can encourage people to use treatments that are non-addictive and not harmful, I think is a good thing, and we should do that. I've supported other legislation to provide loan forgiveness to people who practice acupuncture in underserved areas. So short answer is yes.
Thank you. Would you like me to repeat the question?
No. I have no objection to people using acupuncture or having the health plans support acupuncture. I would ask that whoever does use acupuncture, they know the advantages or disadvantages of acupuncture before they do it.
Thank you. All right, question number 11, Merriman and then Freiberg. How would you balance energy policy and environmental concerns?
Merriman first? My career is in telecommunications. The second company I worked for basically was Great River Energy. Great River Energy had a coal plant in North Dakota, and we transmitted electricity to Minnesota with a high voltage line. The power companies are moving away from coal and hydrocarbon and towards wind and solar, but wind and solar isn't going to do it. We need a base load capacity that's nuclear. So if we were to build nuclear plants, that would be great. I think small nuclear is safer than nuclear was in the past, and I would like to see more nuclear and less wind.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Freiberg?
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. How would you balance energy policy and environmental concerns?
Well, Minnesota is one of the fastest warming states in the country. It's nearly 3 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than it was 100 years ago. So I do think climate change is real, and Minnesota is kind of ground zero for it. We've passed quite a few policies the past session to address this. So the goal is for electricity to be 100% carbon-free by 2040. We have a new state agency, the Minnesota Climate Innovation Finance Authority. That's a publicly accountable financing authority. It's known as a green bank in other states that will accelerate the adoption of proven clean energy technology and greenhouse gas reduction projects. We've invested $40 million in weatherization projects. So those are just some of the things we've done. Balancing the environment and energy policy. I do think we need to look at ways to further reduce the reliance on fossil fuels in the coming session.
Thank you. Okay, question number 12, Mr. Freiberg and then Mr. Merriman. For fiscal year 2024, actual revenue exceeded forecast by 4 to 1, I'm not sure, by 400 million. That is between 1% and 2% more money than we expected. What does this outcome signal for development of future budgets and taxation policy?
Well, I think it signals that our budget situation is strong, that we've made reasonable investments, and that don't put the state in a bad fiscal situation. I mean, Minnesota is constitutionally required to balance the budget every 2 years. We've done that. We have a fairly progressive tax structure in Minnesota, so the less money you make, the less your tax burden is. And we've passed actually, in spite of what some of the rhetoric that's out there, we've actually passed a great deal of tax cuts that benefit lower and middle income people. I can list those off if people are interested, but I do think just generally the fact that there is likely going to be a budget surplus signifies that the economy in Minnesota is strong and the state is in a strong fiscal position.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Merriman?
In 2023, there was an $18 billion surplus, and we spent it. We added $10 billion in taxes in 2023, and we spent it. We need to control our spending. We need to give some of that money back to the voters and the electorate. For some reason, the legislature can't stop spending, and if the revenues are greater, then yes, let's give the money back.
Okay, thank you. This will be the last question, and it's both sides, so it's a long one. The fastest growing age group in Minnesota is the eldest age group, people over the age of 80. This is also the adult age group most likely to need supportive services. In order to meet the growing demand for these services efficiently and humanely, we will need more living options for elder persons with disabilities. House File 4220 extended the definition of an assisted living facility to additional housing options if they provide services to residents who need them, and set up a framework for making sure that consumers were clear about their expectations for services. If elected, how would you propose to address the needs of older Minnesotans who have a disability? And this is Mr. Freiberg and then Mr. Merriman.
Thank you. So in 2023, the legislature passed a bill that included $173 million for one-time nursing facility grants, $75 million for workforce incentive fund, and $36.5 million for a nursing facility temporary add-on. So we've, started to make we've made some additional investments in nursing homes. And the workforce for these facilities is also critically important. That people can, sometimes people can make more money working in fast food than they can working, serving vulnerable people, whether they're elderly or whether they're disabled or whether they're both. Those are, just making sure that the workers have the resources they need to be able to have a living wage, I think is critically important. And making sure there's plenty of housing options as well. There's a lot of barriers put into place at the city level. There was some interesting legislation put forward the past year related to zoning codes and just allowing, making cities, allowing them to have multi-unit housing in different places. That didn't end up passing, but I know that's going to be a continued discussion that we're going to have, because we need to make sure there's plenty of housing options for seniors, for people with disabilities, and for everyone, frankly, for young couples starting out too. So I'll just leave it at that, I guess.
Okay. Mr. Merriman, do you want me to repeat it?
Well, it's a concern of mine, because I'm over 80. And if one looks at what the cost of nursing homes is for a person, once you go into a nursing home, you will likely lose your entire life savings in a few years once you go into a nursing home. That's not good. So one needs to have an alternative, and I think that what Mike is talking about is a path forward, but I don't think a socialist path where the government provides all the funding and the facilities is the way to go. A lot of it has to be support from your family. And if we do not allow children to be born, if we do not have families, we're in trouble. So we need to have children, we need to have families, and we need to have family support.
Thank you. You now will each have 1 minute for your closing statement. We will start with Mr. Merriman.
Well, I want to thank you for attending this forum. Please vote this November for candidates who will work hard to support you and grow the economy, stop the massive incursion of illegal immigrants along the southern border, not weaken the electric power grid, and will steer the country away from war. We do not want war. World War III would be terrible. These candidates include myself, Delia L. Equity for the U.S. House, Bryce White for Senate, Donald Trump, and J.D. Vance for President, Vice President.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Freiberg?
Thank you once again to the League of Women Voters for hosting this debate and focusing on the issues before us at the state level. I definitely learned a lot. I was interested in hearing your granddaughters in Gitsy's. That's the Greater Twin Cities Youth Symphony. My daughter's in that too. Maybe we could carpool to one of the concerts sometime, Steve. It's been an honor to be your state representative, to serve as your state representative, and I hope you'll elect me to serve another 2 years. The debate showed there are clear differences between my opponent and myself. I hope I've made the case for my reelection. If you'd like more information, you can visit my website, www.mikefreiberg.com. You can email me at freiberg@gmail.com. That's Freiberg. I'd be glad to hear from you anytime. So thank you once again for this debate, and I hope everyone has a great night.
Thank you very much. I would like to remind everyone again that the views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates and not those of the League of Women Voters. Let's give these candidates a round of applause for stepping up and running for office. Now I will turn the event back over to Nancy for the wrap-up.
League of Women Voters, Crystal, New Hope, East Plymouth, Robbinsdale would like to thank you all for coming tonight and our online audience for viewing. We would especially like to thank our moderator, Cindy Shevlin-Woodcock, and the candidates for being part of the democratic process by running for office and being willing to serve our communities. We always hope there's enough time for all questions, but if you feel that your question was not addressed, please contact the candidate directly after the forum. We want to encourage voters and the candidates to utilize vote411.org, a national League of Women Voters website that is the only nonpartisan one-stop site for all voter information. You can find more information about candidates and about voting at vote411.org or mnvotes.gov, the Minnesota Secretary of State website. Links to all the candidate forums and additional voter information can be found on the League of Women Voters Crystal, New Hope, East Plymouth, Robbinsdale website, which is lwvcnhepr.org. The League researches issues important to our members and our communities. If you're interested in finding out more about the League, what we do, and how you can make a difference through the League, please pick up a membership brochure or visit us at lwvcnhepr.org or talk to one of us. We'd be happy to talk to you about membership. Membership is open to anyone age 16 and older. Early voting starts tomorrow, September 20th at the area city halls during regular business hours and runs through Saturday, November 2nd. Again, thank you for coming, and remember to vote on or before November 5th. Your vote is your voice.
Thank you.